Hey guys, I just wanted to make a quick video in response to the Grand National stuff. I was actually there on Saturday, and I was there in support of Animal Rising. I'm certainly not speaking as a spokesperson, I'm speaking as an individual who was there in support. And I just wanted to share some of the experiences that I had sort of on the ground on the day. We were there sort of having dialogues with people going to the Grand National, the punters. And as they were walking in, there was a big queue, and we were just talking to people in the queue at the start of the day. And it was really fascinating, the number of discussions that I had with the punters who confessed themselves that there was conflict in them, about going to the race, and how they weren't fully, they had admitted that it was problematic. And some people sort of agreed at the end of the discussion to not place any bets and not fund the industry and contribute to the industry. And a lot of people going there because, they were going for a stag do or whatever. And some people weren't very comfortable going. Which I found really interesting, and I was really surprised by that. I just expected to get quite stonewalled or not, but people were actually quite willing to talk about the issues. And so we talked to them on the way in, but we also talked to them on the way out. And essentially, we got the usual insults and abuse, which is to be expected. But we also witnessed so many people coming out of the grounds in tears and in shock, because they had just witnessed the death of a horse right in front of their very eyes. And I think it was really obvious to me at that moment that it had cut through all of the fun and entertainment, and the reality of the seriousness of a horse dying in front of them became far more important than making jokes and placing bets. And they needed consoling, and we sort of were there to support them, and they were sort of, and people were saying, I'm never going to the races ever again. Now, obviously that wasn't everyone coming out, but there were a significant number of people that were really quite grief-stricken by what they just witnessed. And I think there's been a lot of talk about how the welfare of the animals, there were a few sort of tropes that everyone seemed to be saying, which was along the lines of the horses are treated in the most amazing ways. They have better lives than we do. They're treated like kings and queens, kind of thing. But for me, even if that's true, imagine that there was a 3-day football tournament, I don't know, and 3 football players had died, right? And these football players were treated in the best way. They had the best treatment, as footballers seem to do. But 3 players had died. People wouldn't be saying, oh, they get treated in the best way possible. They had such a good life. People would be questioning what happened and investigating why 3 people had died at a 3-day football competition. Another thing I found really, I don't really watch the races because I don't particularly agree with them. And one thing that occurred to me was how quickly the guys, after poor Hill 16 died at the first hurdle at the Grand National race, how quickly the guys ran on with the screens to cover it up. And to me, that's like quite revealing. It's like the elephant in the room almost, or it's like the massive problem that's hiding in plain sight. And it shows how basically the industry are desperate to hide what's happening. And the fact that this is happening from the public, because they're worried that the public will find it too unsavoury and maybe will be turned off from the sport. It's not nice to see, but that's the truth and that's the reality, and that's what people did see. And that's what changed people's hearts. And we could see that on the ground. There was a different energy, and honestly, I had so many fascinating conversations, even with people walking out and exiting. I don't know if there was an entire mood change for most people, or for everyone, but there was definitely a shift for a lot of people. And I had conversations with people that you just wouldn't expect to be openly receptive to that. People who on the way in, I actually bumped into a group who I'd seen on the way in and I talked to, and they were quite, they just kind of like laughed at us and just threw a couple of insults on the way in. But on the way out, I caught up with them, and what one guy ended up saying was just like, I totally get what you're talking about now. And I have like a lot of respect for what you're doing, and I'm not sure it is right what's going on. So I thought I'd share that perspective to say that even the people that are going to this race aren't necessarily, in full support of it. And it's time that we reconsider our relationship with these animals, because it's not just the race that's the problem. Our problem is that we see these animals. I mean, I've just listened to the radio interview on BBC 5 Live or whatever it was, with Hill 16's trainer, and I've great sympathy for the trainer and everyone involved with Hill 16, because I'm sure that they are really genuinely quite grief stricken. I mean, I saw seeing the jockey responding to turn. I watched him turning around and seeing Hill 16 there dead on the track. He looked like he was really grief stricken, heartbroken. I don't know if that's true, but that's how it seemed to me. And I don't think he feels like a winner this weekend. I certainly don't think the trainer or the owners of Hill 16 would have felt like winners this weekend. Like, who's winning apart from the people making shitloads of money? And the odd person who wins a bet. It kind of cuts through, like seeing the reality of it kind of cuts through. And imagine if that was a family member just dying in front of you, and these are family members to these trainers and these jockeys, and they have built up a relationship. But what I was going to say about Sandy, who is Hill 16's trainer, is there's two parts of it, which is his genuine relationship with this horse that's very real, but also the part of him that has an identity that's steeped in the whole industry. And his opening statements when he was interviewed on BBC Radio were basically talking about how framing this individual being in a way that was all about his performance and all about him within the contexts of racing, rather than him as an individual. And it was only when Nikki, the presenter, prompted him to sort of question how he felt about it from an emotional standpoint, did he start talking about the characteristics of Hill 16 himself as an individual, as a horse, like his characteristics. And even then, it seemed like Sandy was still talking about it kind of as if he within the context of how he might perform. And I understand why he would do that, and I'm not necessarily judging him, because that's the world he lives in. That's the environment that he has existed within for so long, and that's his mindset when it comes to this. And I think actually people that are so surrounded by the industry or whatever, they're sort of, they can't see the wood for the trees. And I think what's most revealing is someone like a 7-year-old witnessing, like, so one of the callers called in and said that her daughter held a little funeral for Hill 16, and that's someone who is completely impartial and unbiased in any way, and just witnessing it for what it is and seeing it for the truth of what it is. And so there's probably these two parts. I imagine that there's two parts, and there's two parts to Sandy and everyone involved in the industry, where they want to maintain their identity, their livelihood. They don't want to be ostracized by the rest of the industry for potentially causing harm to the industry or bringing bad reputation to the industry. So there's so many complex things involved. But when you strip those things away, what we've seen is 3 beings die this weekend. And that holds weight. That's real. There's gravity to that. And that was felt. You could feel it amongst the crowd on the floor. So yeah, I've gone on much longer than I had anticipated, but I just thought it important to share some thoughts on what I'd seen as a sort of protester or demonstrator on the ground. Not even the people who were going were necessarily on board with it. And I think there is a shift at the moment where I saw somewhere like 80% of under 40s won't be placing bets, or don't think placing bets on horse racing is an ethical thing to do, and they won't be doing it. So it seems to be that it's only a matter of time until this industry sort of collapses and we see the truth of the matter, and we stop letting people profit off the exploitation of beings. And one more thing I wanted to mention was, I don't think anyone's really mentioned it in the media, is how humans who get, like the jockeys themselves, they can consent to this, but horses, they can't really consent at all. They have to be, it's literally called broken in. They have to be broken in order to say that they can comply with, they can behave in a way that we want them to. We want them to behave so that we can benefit from them. We're not thinking about their best interests primarily. We are trying to, we sort of, it sounds like quite a harsh phrase, but they're sort of enslaved in a way, and they're totally under we have complete dominion over them. And we have complete control over their lives. And yes, we may pamper them and treat them in the best way possible, but ultimately they didn't have a choice. And wild horses exist, in other parts of the world. They exist, I don't know how wild they are, but like down south in the New Forest and things like that, they're perfectly happy just living their lives without, needing us to pamper them. And if you try and ride on their backs, you try to ride a wild horse on their back, they'll throw you off pretty quick. I mean, you won't even be able to get close to them, let alone get on their backs. So, and it takes an enormous amount of training for a horse to become comfortable with a rider. And that's what the term broken is. And I think that's really it's like broken spirit, that is a horse's spirit being broken into submission, into behaving in a way that the humans want them to behave, so that they can then have some peace from the torment and I'm sure the negative reinforcement tactics that are being used. And people also talk about this is what they want to do, but I mean, they live in these tiny paddocks, right, protected from the fields because it's a risk of injury if they go into the fields. They live this very protected, sheltered life, and then they are the only time they get to run is with a person on their back. So they do get excited to go out for a gallop, go out for a run, whatever it is. But I doubt it's because they have a person on their back. I suspect more it's because they want to go for a gallop, and that's what their natural instincts and their inclination is to do. And if they had autonomy, if they were roaming wildly, they would just be running around as and when they pleased and fulfilling their instinctual needs as and when they pleased. So to say that we're giving these horses a good life, I think there will be elements, of course, where thousands of pounds, hundreds of thousands, I'm sure, will be spent on these horses and keeping them in good condition. But I mean, the goal is to keep them in good condition so that they can perform at their peak when it comes to us exploiting them for entertainment. That's what's going on. That's why they're pampered. Let's be under no illusions. They're not being pampered because that's what's best for the horse. They're being pampered so that they can be in the best condition to run as best as they possibly can, so that the owners can have a chance of winning the Grand National. That's what's going on. That's the reality. So I'll wrap it up there. I've definitely gone way over what I had intended to do. But let me know your thoughts. I don't know if any of this resonates with you, or if it doesn't, I'd really actually be open to hearing other people's opinions. If they think I've got any of this wrong, I'll be totally open to that. Let's open a dialogue about this. I think it's such an important thing to talk about. Thanks, guys.